He was a single father, barely managing two restless twin daughters. She came into his home as a simple nanny, but behind her kind smile hid a secret powerful enough to turn their lives upside down. No one could have imagined that behind the shabby little house on a quiet street would begin a story where love, betrayal, and billions would collide. Rain slid down the window pane in thin, steady streams, blurring the view of the quiet Seattle street. Outside, inside the cramped kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of cocoa and the faint dampness of wet rubber boots lined up haphazardly by the door. Ethan Cole stood at the counter, one hand holding a half-empty carton of milk, the other reaching desperately to stop his twin daughters, Mia and Ava, from turning the kitchen table into their personal jungle gym. He was 30 years old with tired brown eyes and dark hair that always seemed one comb short of order. More often than not, exhaustion clung to him like a shadow, the price of trying to balance coding deadlines with fatherhood. "Daddy, she took my spoon," Ava shouted, her curls bouncing as she lunged for her sister. "Did not," Mia shot back, her voice pitched high with equal parts mischief and indignation. Ethan sighed, placing the milk carton down a little too heavily. It splashed into the cereal bowl, overspilling onto the table. He pressed his palm against his forehead, muttering to himself, "One day, just one day without chaos." But chaos was the only rhythm of his home. Two 5-year-old whirlwinds had been both his salvation and his undoing since the day their mother walked out 2 years earlier. He adored them fiercely, but the truth was that he was drowning. Drowning in laundry, in bills, in guilt that he couldn't be both mother and father no matter how hard he tried. On the fridge, held in place by a plastic dinosaur magnet, was a freshly printed sheet of paper. The bold letters read, "Looking for a nanny. Two 5-year-old girls. Must be patient, energetic, and love dinosaurs. Flexible schedule. Meals included." It was his last hope, his quiet admission that he couldn't do it all alone anymore. He had typed it up late the night before, after tucking the girls in and collapsing at the kitchen table, staring at an endless to-do list. Now as he wiped milk off the counter with a threadbare towel, he glanced at the ad with a strange mixture of hope and dread. What if no one replied? What if the wrong kind of person replied? He thought of all the ways a stranger could come into their lives and disrupt what fragile balance they had left. Still, he had no choice. The deadlines at work were closing in, and with the old nanny gone to care for her sick mother, the weight had become unbearable. After the girls were finally corralled at the table with their soggy cereal, Ethan sat down with his laptop, opening his email, half expecting nothing. But there it was, an application, barely an hour after posting. He blinked in surprise, clicking it open. The name read, Harper Bennett, 22. The email was short, professional, with attached references from 2 families and a child care center. She had highlighted her experience in early education and her knack for creative learning activities. But it was the photo that caught his attention. A young woman with tied-back hair, clear eyes, and a smile that wasn't polished for presentation, but warm in its simplicity. Ethan leaned back, staring at the screen longer than he meant to, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly for the first time in days. Ava tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are we getting a new friend?" Ethan glanced down at her expectant face, then back at the email. His chest tightened with a complicated mixture of relief and fear. "Maybe," he murmured. "Maybe someone's finally coming to help us." He didn't know then how much that single response would change the shape of their lives. For now, it was just a name on a screen. But beneath it lay the first thread of a story neither he nor his daughters could have predicted. The next evening, when the rain finally gave way to a damp, gray calm, there was a knock at the door. Ethan hesitated before opening it, suddenly second-guessing himself. He had almost convinced himself it would be a mistake to let a stranger in, but the sound of Ava's laughter mixed with Mia's impatient shouts, "Daddy, someone's here," pushed him forward. He opened the door and found Harper standing there, a splash of color against the dreary Seattle backdrop. She wore a bright yellow raincoat and sneakers, her hair tied back neatly, and in her arms she carried a small paper bag. The scent of freshly baked cookies drifted upward, softening the tension that clung to Ethan's shoulders. "Hi, Mr. Cole?" Her voice was warm, with a touch of nervousness she tried to mask. "I thought it might be nice to bring something for the girls." Mia and Ava peeked from behind their father's legs, wide-eyed. Ethan motioned her inside, feeling the awkward weight of this moment. He had invited her, but still the reality of having a stranger step into the messy, fragile world he guarded so closely made his chest tighten. The house smelled of crayons, spilled juice, and the faint detergent he used too sparingly. "Girls," he said softly, crouching down to their level. "This is Harper. She might help us out here for a while." Neither child moved. Ava hid her face behind Ethan's sleeve, while Mia stared boldly at Harper, her lips pressed into a stubborn line. Harper crouched down too, lowering herself so her eyes met theirs. From the bag she pulled 2 cookies, wrapped in napkins. "I know introductions are scary," she said gently, "but I have a secret. I'm really good at drawing dinosaurs. And not just T-Rexes, the hard ones too, like Parasaurolophus. I bet you can't guess my favorite one." The tension cracked. Mia tilted her head, curiosity overtaking suspicion. "What's a What?" Harper smiled, sketching the shape of a long crest in the air. "If you let me sit with you later, I'll show you." In less than half an hour, the living room was transformed. Chairs became rocky cliffs, blankets draped across them turned into jungle vines, and the kitchen timer clicked down like the ticking of a volcano. The twins roared and scrambled, their giggles echoing through the small house. Harper played along, crowning Ava Queen of the Jungle and Mia Explorer of the Lost Valley. Ethan leaned against the doorway, stunned. His daughters hadn't taken to anyone this quickly since their mother left. They were usually wary, hesitant with strangers, clinging to him like anchors. Yet here they were, giggling, running, alive in a way he hadn't seen in months. When Harper finally tucked the blankets back into a pile, she pulled a notebook from her bag. With careful handwriting, she outlined a routine. Wake-up time, bedtime rituals, ideas for indoor and outdoor play, and small comfort steps if either girl had a nightmare or meltdown. She explained each point as though she had already memorized the rhythm of his family, her tone calm and confident. Ethan found himself caught between awe and suspicion. It seemed too good, almost rehearsed. Still, as he watched Mia curl into Harper's side with a cookie crumb smile, he couldn't deny the shift in the room. The chaos was still there, but it felt softer, managed, less suffocating. When Harper finally stood to leave, the girls clung to her legs, begging for another story. She promised she'd be back, her eyes meeting Ethan's as she said it. For a moment, he forgot to answer. He just nodded, a quiet exhale escaping him. After the door closed, Ethan looked at the scattered pillows. The drawings Harper had made of dinosaurs now taped to the fridge, and the sleepy joy still glowing in his daughter's eyes. He hadn't expected much when he posted that ad. Certainly not this. For the first time in months, as he tucked Mia and Ava into bed, he felt something new pressing against the exhaustion and fear that had defined his nights. It was fragile, tentative, but real. It was the first trace of hope. The weeks that followed began to take on a rhythm Ethan hadn't realized he was missing. At first, he resisted the idea that someone else could slip so easily into the daily fabric of his daughter's lives. But Harper made it impossible not to notice the difference. Every morning she arrived promptly, raincoat hood pulled tight against the drizzle that never seemed to stop in Seattle. The twins would rush to the door when they saw her, squealing as if a favorite cousin had come to play. On the walk to preschool, Harper carried an umbrella big enough to shield all 3 of them, her voice carrying over the patter of rain as she read aloud from Charlotte's Web or told stories about faraway places. Sometimes she let the girls pick the story. Other times she invented one on the spot, weaving Mia and Ava into the plot as princesses or scientists or explorers. Ethan noticed that the girls had stopped complaining about the walk entirely. They came home humming little songs or retelling the adventures Harper had spun for them. Evenings were no longer endless battles with boredom. Harper transformed the kitchen into a laboratory. She brought out vinegar and baking soda, adding food coloring until the girls shrieked with delight at the lava that erupted from their makeshift volcano. Another day, she filled a bowl with water and pepper, showing how soap made the germs scatter. Science, she explained, wasn't just for big kids. It was for anyone curious enough to ask why. Ethan stood by the counter pretending to check emails, but he found himself drawn into the experiments, smiling despite the tired weight that usually pressed down on him after work. The house itself changed under Harper's presence. The fridge, once bare except for bills and reminders, became covered in drawings, dinosaurs with sharp teeth, stick figure families holding hands, castles with dragons perched on the towers. In the bathroom, rubber ducks suddenly wore helmets made of aluminum foil, products of Harper's insistence that even bath time could be an adventure. On the windowsill, paper cups lined up neatly, each filled with soil and bean sprouts pushing through. Observation gardens, as Harper called them. One night, Ethan's quiet trust in Harper deepened in a way he hadn't expected. Ava woke up crying, her forehead hot and damp with fever. Panic flared in Ethan's chest. He reached for his phone, ready to call for help, when headlights swept across the front window. Moments later, there was a knock at the door. Harper stood there, hair damp from the rain, carrying a thermos of chamomile tea and a small medical kit. "I had a feeling," she explained softly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She sat at Ava's bedside, her flashlight casting a gentle glow as she checked the girl's breathing, smoothed her curls back from her face, and whispered a story about a brave little star who outshone the night. Mia, restless from the commotion, curled up next to her sister and fell asleep listening to Harper's voice. Ethan stood in the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets, unable to move. Watching Harper work with such patience and care, he felt something stir deep inside him. For 2 years he had shouldered everything alone, convinced that asking for help was weakness, that no one else could understand what his daughters needed. But here she was, calm, steady, present. And for the first time in a long while, the burden didn't feel like his alone. When dawn came, Ava's fever had broken. Harper left quietly, promising to check in later. Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee, staring out the kitchen window at the gray sky. The house was quiet, the twins still sleeping soundly. He realized his chest felt lighter, though he couldn't explain why. It wasn't just that Harper had kept Ava safe. It was that she had shown him something he had nearly forgotten. That family didn't have to mean blood alone, and that strength could sometimes be found in letting someone else stand beside you. The first signs of trouble crept in quietly, like a draft under a door Ethan thought was shut tight. Life with the twins had finally begun to feel balanced. Harper's presence smoothed the rough edges of their days, and laughter seemed to echo through the house more often than tears. But the past has a way of finding cracks, and it came back to Ethan in the form of a letter from an attorney delivered on an ordinary Thursday morning. He read the letter twice, his heart pounding harder each time. His former sister-in-law, Anna, was petitioning for custody of Mia and Ava. She claimed that Ethan's demanding job and lack of consistent childcare proved he could not provide the stability the girls needed. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. His ex-wife, who had walked away 2 years ago without looking back, had given her blessing to Anna's request. Suddenly, the fragile security Ethan had built felt as though it were crumbling beneath his feet. That evening, while the girls played with Harper in the living room, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread out before him. The sound of Mia's giggles drifted through the doorway, but it did nothing to ease the tightness in his chest. He rubbed his temples, trying to push away the panic. When Harper finally came in, he handed her the paper without a word. She read it slowly, her brow furrowing. When she looked up, her eyes were calm but determined. "We'll fight this," she said. Ethan shook his head. "It's not that simple. Anna has a stable home, money, family support. I work late nights. I barely manage everything as it is. They'll say I can't give the girls what they need." "You give them love," Harper countered firmly. "You give them safety. That matters more than anything else." She paused, then added, "But we'll need to show it. We'll need proof." Over the next week, Harper became more than just a nanny. She became Ethan's ally. She spent long evenings compiling records, medical documents, preschool reports, drawings from the girls that showed them smiling at home. She gathered testimonials from teachers and neighbors, anyone who could speak to the environment Ethan had built. She even created detailed schedules, showing the girls' daily routines and the consistency they had with her and their father. The courthouse loomed over Ethan like a storm cloud. On the morning of the first hearing, he dressed the girls carefully, his hands trembling as he buttoned their coats. They clung to Harper, sensing the tension that he couldn't hide. In the waiting area, Mia climbed onto Harper's lap and whispered, "Are they going to take us away?" Harper's throat tightened, but she smoothed the girl's hair and said, "No, sweetheart. You're right where you belong." When it was time to step into the courtroom, Ethan felt as if the air had thickened, every breath a struggle. Anna sat at the opposite table, her lawyer beside her, radiating confidence. She looked at the twins with a smile that struck Ethan as rehearsed. He knew she meant well in her own way, but she didn't know his daughters like he did. Didn't know Ava's night terrors or Mia's fear of thunderstorms. Didn't know the small rituals that calmed them or the way they curled into him when they needed comfort. As the lawyers began their arguments, Ethan's heart hammered, each word like a nail in the fragile foundation of his family. But when Harper's turn came to speak, something shifted. She stood with a quiet strength, presenting the folders she had so carefully prepared. She spoke not with emotion, but with steady clarity about the girls' routines, their health, their happiness. She explained how Ethan, despite his demanding job, was always present when it mattered most, how he had learned to braid hair for preschool picture day, how he rearranged his schedule for doctor's appointments, how he never missed a bedtime story. The judge listened, flipping through the documents Harper handed over. Ethan watched, his chest tight with both fear and gratitude. Without Harper, he would have walked into this battle unarmed. With her, he felt, for the first time, that he might stand a chance. As the hearing adjourned for the day, Ethan gathered the girls close. They were tired, their small faces pressed against his shoulders, but they were safe in his arms. Harper walked beside him, her hand brushing his arm as if to steady him. Outside the courthouse, Ethan looked up at the gray sky and let out a long breath. The storm wasn't over, not by a long shot, but as he watched Harper buckle the twins into their car seats, he realized something he hadn't dared admit before. He didn't just need her help, he needed her. Not just for the girls, not just for the court battle, but for the fragile, battered heart that had been carrying too much alone for too long. The morning it happened began like any other. Gray clouds, drizzle tapping against the kitchen window, the smell of toast hanging in the air. Ethan had just managed to coax the twins into their shoes when a sudden flash lit up the room. He froze, confused. Then another burst of light followed, this time through the front window. When he stepped outside, heart thundering, he was met with the sight of a black SUV parked across the street and a group of photographers crowded near the curb, their cameras clicking rapidly. "Mr. Cole!" one of them shouted. "Is it true your nanny is Harper Bennett, the daughter of Richard Bennett, CEO of Bennett Holdings?" The words struck Ethan like a slap. He turned back toward the door, where Harper had appeared, holding Ava's backpack in one hand. Her face drained of color, her lips parting as if the air had been stolen from her lungs. The girls clung to her legs, frightened by the chaos. Ethan ushered everyone back inside quickly, shutting the door against the barrage of voices and camera flashes. He turned to Harper, confusion and betrayal wrestling inside him. "What are they talking about?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Harper didn't answer right away. She set the backpack down carefully, her hands trembling. Finally, she whispered, "It's true." That evening, after the twins were asleep, Harper sat at the kitchen table across from Ethan, her eyes fixed on her hands. She told him everything in a voice that shook at first, but grew steadier with each word. Her father was Richard Bennett, billionaire, logistics magnate, a man whose name carried weight on the covers of magazines and in boardrooms around the world. After her mother's death, Harper explained, her father had tried to shape her into his image. He wanted her to step into the company, to play the role of successor, to carry on the family empire. But Harper couldn't. She wanted a life of her own, one built on compassion and connection, not quarterly reports and ruthless negotiations. When she refused, her father called her weak, accused her of wasting her potential. Their relationship fractured, and she walked away. "I changed everything," she said softly. "My apartment, my social media, even the way I introduced myself. I wanted to be judged by who I was, not by my last name. I didn't tell you because I needed this job to be about the girls, and about who I really am." Ethan sat in silence, struggling to process her confession. He wasn't angry about her wealth or her background. What cut him was the secrecy. For weeks he had trusted her with the most precious part of his life, and yet she had hidden something so monumental. "You should have told me," he finally said, his voice rough with restrained emotion. "I let you into their lives, into my home. I trusted you without knowing who you really were." Harper's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "You did trust me. That's why I didn't say anything. I wanted you to see me for what I do, not for what my name means. I didn't want money or my father's shadow to change how you saw me." Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she had hidden her identity, or the fact that part of him understood why. He had been abandoned once before, left to pick up the pieces alone. Now with Harper, he had begun to believe in something steadier, something real. But this secret had cracked the fragile trust between them. "I've always been afraid everyone would leave," he admitted quietly, surprising himself with the confession. "And now, I don't know if I can trust that you'll stay." Harper's voice broke as she leaned forward. "I'm not leaving, Ethan. I chose this. I chose you. I chose the girls. My name doesn't matter. What I do here does." The words lingered in the space between them, heavy and fragile. Ethan wanted to believe her, but the wound of betrayal still burned too fresh. He rose from the table, unable to meet her gaze. That night, long after Harper had gone home, Ethan stood in the girls' bedroom doorway, watching Mia and Ava sleep, their small chests rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. He wanted to protect them from everything: lawsuits, cameras, broken promises. He wanted to shield them from the same fear of abandonment that haunted him. But as he closed the door softly behind him, he couldn't escape the truth echoing in his mind. Harper had become part of their lives in ways no one else had, and losing her now would break more than just his trust. It would break the fragile family they had all started to build together. The knock on the door came just after the twins had fallen asleep. The house was quiet, filled with the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of wood settling against the cold night. Ethan rose from the couch, expecting maybe a neighbor or a delivery. But when he opened the door, the sight before him sent a chill down his spine. A tall man stood there, shoulders squared beneath an impeccably tailored coat, silver streaking his dark hair. His presence was commanding, almost suffocating. Behind him, a sleek black car idled at the curb, a driver waiting patiently. "Good evening," the man said, his voice steady, almost clipped. His eyes shifted past Ethan into the house until they landed on Harper, who had appeared in the hallway, frozen in place. "We need to talk." Ethan didn't need an introduction. He knew instantly this was Richard Bennett, the man whose name had been whispered by the reporters outside, the man who had cast a long shadow over Harper's life. Harper stepped forward slowly, her face pale but her spine straight. "Dad," she said quietly. Richard's eyes softened for only the briefest moment before his features hardened again. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, his gaze sweeping across the modest living room. The toys scattered on the floor, the children's drawings taped to the fridge, the faint smell of crayon wax lingering in the air. To him it must have looked small, ordinary, beneath the weight of the empire he commanded. "You are my daughter," Richard said, turning back to Harper. His voice was low, deliberate, filled with authority. "And I will not allow you to waste your life here, tied down to strangers' problems. Come home. Take your rightful place. There's an office waiting for you at the company, a seat on the foundation's board. You can have stability, security, a future that matches your potential." Harper's hands trembled, but her voice did not. "This is my life," she answered. "These aren't strangers. Ethan, Mia, Ava, they're my family now." Richard's lips curled in something between a smirk and a frown. Family? A man barely holding his life together, raising 2 children in a leaking house, with nothing to offer you but struggle? You deserve more than this. You deserve more than him. His words hung in the air like shards of glass. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides, heat rushing through him. Every instinct screamed to defend himself, to push back, but something inside told him this wasn't his fight. This was Harper's moment to stand against the very force she had been running from for years. Harper took a step closer to her father, her chin lifting, her eyes blazing with a quiet strength. "You think money makes a home? It doesn't. People do. People who stay when things get hard. People who don't walk away when love asks more of them. That's what makes a family. Not bank accounts, not empires, and certainly not control." For a moment, Richard faltered. His eyes flickered, something unspoken moving beneath the steel. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, buried under the armor he had worn for decades. He straightened his coat, his voice once again cold and precise. "Think about what you're doing," he said. "I leave tomorrow morning. My door will remain open. For now. But don't expect me to come back knocking." He turned and walked out, the door closing behind him with a heavy finality. The hum of the car faded into the night, leaving the house in silence. Harper stood in the hallway, her hands trembling at her sides. Ethan stepped toward her, but she shook her head slightly, needing to steady herself first. Finally, she looked at him, her eyes glistening but fierce. "Now you know everything," she whispered. "But I need you to believe me. I didn't choose his world. I chose this one. I chose you." And the girl's Ethan searched her face, seeing both the fear and the determination written there. He wanted to tell her he believed her, that he wasn't afraid anymore. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply reached for her hand, holding it tight, as if that small act alone could bridge the gap between doubt and trust. That night, long after Harper had gone home, Ethan sat in the quiet house, listening to the steady rhythm of his daughter's breathing. He thought about Richard's words, about Harper's defiance, about the way she had stood her ground. He realized something then. Wealth and power might bend the world, but it was choices, ordinary, stubborn choices, that built families. And Harper had made hers. The day of the custody hearing arrived with a kind of heaviness that pressed down on everyone in the house. Ethan woke before dawn, the sky outside still in inky black, his nerves buzzing like static. He dressed the twins carefully, trying to hide the tremor in his hands as he buttoned their little coats and braided their hair the way Harper had taught him. Mia asked if they were going somewhere fun, and Ava clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter, sensing that something wasn't right. Ethan forced a smile, telling them it was just a meeting, but inside his chest felt like it was caving in. At the courthouse, the air was thick with whispers and flashing cameras. The reporters had come not just for the custody battle, but because word had spread. Harper Bennett, daughter of billionaire Richard Bennett, was involved. The title heiress hung in the air like a label she couldn't shake, reducing her to something she had never wanted to be. Ethan saw the way people looked at her, the curiosity, the envy, the judgment. He hated it. In the waiting area, the girls clung to Harper. Mia climbed into her lap and buried her face against her, whispering, "Will they take us away?" Harper smoothed her hair, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "No, sweetheart. You are right where you belong." Ava nodded fiercely, holding Harper's hand as though it anchored her to the ground. Inside the courtroom, Ethan felt the walls close in. Anna, his former sister-in-law, sat at the opposing table, her lawyer polished and confident. They painted a picture of Ethan as overworked, unreliable, stretched too thin to provide the stability the girls needed. They spoke of Anna's stable home, her nearby family, the resources she could offer. Every word felt like a nail hammered into his chest. Ethan wanted to shout, to tell them how hard he fought for his daughters every single day. But the legal language made his love sound small, fragile, almost irrelevant. Then Harper rose. She carried a stack of neatly organized folders, her steps sure, her back straight. She did not speak as the daughter of a CEO, nor as someone hiding behind wealth. She spoke as a caregiver, a witness, a woman who had been in the trenches with Ethan and the girls. With calm precision, she presented the schedules she had created, the medical charts, the preschool notes. She explained the girls' routines, bedtime stories, morning walks, the rituals that gave them comfort. She spoke of their fears, their progress, their joy. Stability, she told the judge, isn't measured by a bank account or a perfect house. Stability is knowing that every night you'll be tucked in by the same voice. It's knowing your tears will be heard and your laughter celebrated. These girls already have that here. With their father, Ethan watched her, a lump forming in his throat. She spoke truths he hadn't known how to put into words, truths that came from knowing his daughters as deeply as he did. When it was Ethan's turn, his voice trembled at first, but he forced himself to steady. He admitted he wasn't perfect. He told the judge how he had learned to braid hair by watching YouTube tutorials late at night, how he traded coding deadlines for pancake breakfasts, how he stumbled but never gave up. He spoke of his love, raw and unpolished, the kind that refused to break even when everything else did. Then something no one expected happened. Richard Bennett stood. The room hushed instantly, every camera turning toward him. The judge raised an eyebrow but allowed him to speak. Richard's voice was deep, steady, but for the first time, there was something softer beneath it. "I was wrong," he said, his eyes fixed on Harper. "I believed strength was control, that success was measured by power. But my daughter has shown me something different. Strength is staying. Strength is choosing to be present, even when it's hard, and she has chosen to stand by this family." He paused, letting the silence stretch before continuing. I will fund a program for single parents, housing, childcare, emergency support, and I withdraw any support for actions that would harm these children. The shock rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, the buzz of whispers filling the air. But all Ethan saw was Harper, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall, her father's words cracking the armor she had built around her heart. The judge took a long moment before speaking. The petition for custody is denied. The children remain with their father. Ms. Harper Bennett is recognized as a legal guardian and trusted caregiver in this household. Ethan's knees nearly gave out from relief. He gathered the twins into his arms, their small hands clutching at his shirt. Harper knelt beside them, her forehead touching theirs. The three of them huddled together, a family held together not by law, but by choice, by love, by every small act of courage that had led them here. For the first time in months, Ethan let himself believe that they might actually have a future, not just a fight for survival. And in that moment, he knew he wasn't alone anymore. Spring arrived slowly, as if the city itself needed time to thaw after the weight of winter. The trees along Ethan Street budded with hesitant green, and the yard that had once been cluttered with broken toys and forgotten tools now bore signs of new life. Two crooked garden beds lined the edge of the lawn, each with a hand-painted sign stuck in the dirt. One read MIA, the other AVA, their names written in uneven letters with glitter glue. The girls knelt in the soil every afternoon, proudly watering bean sprouts and tiny marigolds, their giggles carrying through the open windows. Inside the house, everything felt different too. The kitchen, once cluttered with bills and reminders scrawled on scraps of paper, now had a whiteboard hanging on the wall. It was Harper's idea. Each square held colorful notes. Monday, foam volcano experiment. Tuesday, trip to the dinosaur museum. Wednesday, pancake dinner. Life wasn't easier, but it was structured, alive, and full of anticipation. Ethan stood at the sink one evening, sleeves rolled up, apron dusted with flour. He washed dishes while the twins ran around the living room, wearing cardboard crowns Harper had helped them make. She laughed as she adjusted the crooked tiaras, her hair falling loose from its ponytail. The sight made Ethan pause, dish still in his hand, the simple domesticity of the moment sinking into him like warmth after years of cold. He had once thought family meant surviving day by day. Now he realized it meant building something together. Even Richard had changed, though Ethan still didn't fully trust the man. He began visiting without the entourage, no polished suits or black cars, just a hoodie and jeans. He arrived carrying boxes of craft kits or board games, awkward at first, but learning. He sat cross-legged on the living room floor as Mia explained her volcano project, nodding with genuine interest. It wasn't a transformation overnight. There were still walls he hadn't broken down, but his gestures spoke louder than his words. Slowly, Harper's father began to show up not as a billionaire CEO, but as a grandfather trying to learn how to be present. Together with Harper, Richard helped launch something new, the Neighborhood Fund. It provided scholarships for childcare training, created small daycare programs inside workplaces, and gave emergency grants to single parents struggling to stay afloat. Ethan, with his background in coding, volunteered his nights to build the software for the foundation, his laptop glowing softly while the girls slept upstairs. For the first time, he felt his skills doing more than meeting deadlines. They were changing lives. On the twins' 6th birthday, the yard transformed into a miniature science park. Rope bridges stretched between trees, baking soda volcanoes erupted in bursts of fizzing color, and balloons with hand-drawn dinosaurs floated above picnic tables. A banner fluttered in the breeze. Cole Bennett family, and everyone who belongs. Friends, neighbors, teachers, even a few of Harper's co-workers came to celebrate. The girls ran from station to station, faces painted like tigers, their laughter echoing across the yard. Harper knelt to fix Ava's hair clip, while Mia tugged on Ethan's hand, demanding he join the egg and spoon race. He stumbled clumsily through the grass, Harper laughing until tears rolled down her cheeks. In that laughter, Ethan heard something he hadn't known he was waiting for, a sound of pure belonging, of a home finally healed. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the yard, Ethan stood with Harper, watching the twins chase bubbles that glimmered in the air. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as though they had always fit together this way. I never knew home could sound like this, he whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of the truth. Harper turned to him, her eyes warm and steady. Home isn't walls, she said softly. It's people who stay. That night, when the last guests had gone and the girls were tucked into bed, Ethan sat in the quiet living room. The house still bore its imperfections. The roof leaked on rainy days. The bills didn't vanish. But it no longer felt like a place of struggle. It felt like a place of hope. Harper's drawings were taped to the fridge. Mia and Ava's laughter lingered in the corners. And even Richard's tentative attempts at reconciliation hung in the air like a promise of change. The shocking truth was never about Harper's last name or her father's billions. It wasn't about the courtroom victory or the empire she had walked away from. It was that love, ordinary, stubborn, everyday love, had rebuilt something broken. It had stitched together a family not with perfection, but with choice. Ethan realized then that true wealth wasn't measured in empires or accounts. It lived here, in cardboard crowns and garden beds, in shared burdens and whispered promises. And as Harper leaned her head against his shoulder, he knew with absolute certainty that this was the life he had been searching for all along. For me, the value of this ending lies in the fact that it shows true victory isn't about winning in court or proving one's worth to the world, but about learning to be present and to stay when things get hard. Billions, big names, legal battles, all of that may seem enormous, but in reality, it pales next to the simple things. The habit of hugging your children at night, laughter at the kitchen table, the small rituals that make up a home. What I especially appreciate is that the ending doesn't turn Harper into a savior or Ethan into a poor man rescued from misery. On the contrary, it's a story about partnership, about how two people from very different worlds met at one point and managed to create something shared. There are no gilded fairy tale castles here, but there is perseverance, honesty, and the choice to stay. This conclusion is a reminder. Even the smallest decisions to support, not to leave, to help, can change not only another person's life, but your own. The real wealth in this story isn't Richard Bennett's fortune or a famous name, but the belief that love and mutual loyalty can be stronger than any empire.